This podcast is brought to you in partnership with EVA International Media Limited. Hello and welcome to Down to Earth with Terry Virts, where we talk about what matters down here on planet Earth. If you love the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating. Today, I'm going to do something a little bit unusual. Sometimes I do monologues. I don't have a guest scheduled for this week. I'm going to talk about something that I think is super important. It's something that astronauts generally completely avoid altogether. It's probably smarter and wiser to avoid the subject altogether. And that is the subject of politics. But I think it's super critical. We're coming into a point in our country where things are not looking good. And I think that we have some ways through the woods. And I want to talk about that. I've had some other guests on the show that we've talked about different political issues. But please hear me out, because it's something, if you're American, it's super important. We need to do things to fix our country. If you're not American, listen to how we're doing things, take away what we're doing right and learn from what we're doing wrong so you can improve things where you are. But unless you get this done right, things go badly. And I always say, kind of tongue in cheek, but it's true. It's not about the rocket science. It's about the political science. And my time in space, I could see things on Earth. I could see conflict zones, the border between India and Pakistan, the border between North and South Korea. I could see bombs going off in Eastern Ukraine during the Russian-fueled civil war there. I could see politics on Earth. I could see wealth. I could see poverty. And I didn't expect to see that. But it's clear when you see the planet that we should be doing better than we are. So I've got a few thoughts. And when I look out to 2022, the midterm elections this year, and when I look at 2024, these things are coming quickly, and I really don't like what I see. The state of America is obviously so divided. It's obviously so polarized, and everything that we have in place seems to be designed to make that so. We have a two-party system in America, and everything about it is designed to perpetuate itself. It is the ultimate self-licking ice cream cone. When new congressmen get elected, their party boss gives them a letter, and this is the daily schedule, and we expect you to be here and be there. And members of Congress from both parties are told that they're supposed to spend half of their day fundraising. And so each party has rented a building across the street, because you can't fundraise on federal property. It's against the law. They go over there, they pick up the phone, and they call people asking for money half the time. It's insane how much money and the imperative for money. If you don't have money, you can't win in Congress. And they spend way too much time trying to ask for money and way not enough time trying to make smart, intelligent decisions. My podcast with Catherine Gale from probably 6 months ago, highly recommend it. She's an intelligent, smart lady. She has some great ideas on how we can fix this. But I want to say that system, the two-party system that's designed to keep itself in power, there is a lot to lose. Democrats and Republicans both have a tremendous amount to lose, and they do not want to give that up. There's all kinds of laws on every state's books that are solely designed to keep them in power and keep anybody else out of power. It's tremendously difficult, if not impossible, for a third party to come to power here. And I'll say up front, I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. In years gone by, you might have considered me a Republican for sure, but nowadays I'm neither. I'm probably a radical moderate. But I want to talk about some things that I've seen wrong with both parties. So I'm going to make sure, excuse my cough, that I offend everybody here. And I'm going to start off by picking on the Democrats and reasons why they're wrong. Their instinct is to borrow more money and spend more money. And of course, during the pandemic, we had to borrow some money. There was a requirement to keep the economy going. I get that. But they've wanted to just keep on spending and keep on spending and keep on spending. And we need to fix this problem, and we need to fix that problem. And the concept that we need to fix this problem, I think, is better done by individuals than governments, and their willingness to spend way too many trillions of dollars is not good for the long term, because when you borrow money in your own personal life, you're getting something now, but you're going to have to pay for it in the future. Just think about that. You have a car payment well, you got the car 3 years ago, but you're still paying it off. Well, all this money that we're borrowing is going to have to be eventually paid off. And even though there's these fancy economist theories that, well, money's cheap or we'll outgrow the debt, we're not going to outgrow the debt. It's impossible to outgrow the debt that we've gotten. And we were borrowing money at 0.9% interest, and that was fine. Interest rates are going up, and the amount that we spend on interest is already the biggest part of our budget, and that is only going to grow. So that's going to hamstring future presidents and Congresses. They're not going to be able to take the actions that we just did because we ballooned our debt too much, and Democrats are too willing to do that. I think they also promote a culture of victimhood. Everybody's a victim. Your problems in life are someone else's fault. Someone else needs to solve your problems for you. Someone else needs to pay for this or do that. And if one of the things that I've learned in life, if you're a victim, you're going to be a victim. There just comes a point where you need to work on things yourself. Of course, injustices have to be solved. Of course, injustices have to be addressed. We need a just society, but promoting a culture of victimhood keeps them getting votes. It doesn't help the actual people who they're telling they're victims. I think the Democratic energy policy has been extremely flawed. I don't believe in climate change. I know it's a thing. It's a scientific fact that we need to do things to address climate change. But we also need to have a reasonable transition, and oil and gas are going to be a part of that. We need to figure out how to do that smartly. Most importantly, well, not most importantly, one major issue is nuclear power. For some reason, that's just been, President Obama used to say all the above. He didn't say it, but what he meant was except for nuclear power and oil and gas. We really do need an all of the above energy policy that includes nuclear. And we need to have a policy that most of all, above everything else, focuses on geopolitical realities. If you ask Ukraine, they're not worried about climate change. They're worried about Russia attacking them. And Russia's funding itself because of the oil and gas that it sells. And it sells that gas and oil to Europe because, in part, Germany got rid of nuclear power when Fukushima happened in 2013. It was a wildly irresponsible and ideological and emotional decision, not based on fact at all. They had emission-free, made in Germany electricity that was not dependent on Russia. And what they did was they decided to be completely dependent on Russia gas that emits a lot of pollution. It was an insane decision. It's those kind of decisions that can really hurt you. And what we're doing in energy now is the President Biden, he said he wanted to go 50% solar and wind. Well, China has 2/3 of the production capacity for solar, wind, and batteries. And so as we electrify, as we go into solar, wind, and batteries, what we're really doing is transferring trillions of dollars of wealth to China. That's not smart. It's going to be a lot harder to put sanctions on China when they invade Taiwan or wherever else that they want to invade. And we need to start having an energy policy that is, and an economic policy overall that gets us disengaged from China. So that's another spear that I'll throw at our Democrats. And I think with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the president's done a great job keeping NATO together, but I think they've been too timid in general about arming Ukraine. And the only way to win this war is to send more powerful weapons. So I think they were too soft on that. So those are the spears that I'll throw at the Democratic Party. As far as the Republican Party goes, it's become a party of cult, a personality of cult, like Kim Jong-un, the way they revere Trump. It's disgusting. And it's a party of culture war. They don't really have policies, or they actually don't have policies. The 2020 presidential election, the Republican convention did not have a platform. There was literally no Republican platform. It's just a party of culture wars. They're mad about race. They're mad about immigration. They're mad about abortion. They're mad about all these culture warrior topics that don't really get things done that we need to get done with the economy, with our military, with our relationships overseas. This cult and culture war is a horrendous direction for the GOP. They also are promoting this idea of the big lie. It's a real thing. Die große Lüge in Hitler's terms. That's what his plan for propaganda was. You say something that's so outrageous, you make it bigger and bigger, the lie bigger and bigger, and you keep on saying it and people will believe it. Well, 90% of Texas Republican congressmen running for office this year say that the election was stolen. Folks, it wasn't. The election was not stolen. 7 million more people voted for Biden than Trump. And instead of having a debrief like we'd have at NASA or like we'd have in the Air Force and go, why did we mess this up? They just promote this lie rather than making their party better and being a party that Americans want. They're just digging themselves deeper into the culture war hole. And it's a really, really dangerous thing for America. The Democratic philosophy of debt, I think, is very bad. In many ways, the Republican one is worse. If you look at the last 30 or 40 years, Republicans have run much worse debts than Democrats, even they don't admit that. For example, in 2019, Trump was running a $1 trillion deficit, which was immoral. We had economy was booming, unemployment, low interest rates. That was a time to get rid of some of that debt that my kids and my grandkids won't have to pay. But instead, he added another $1 trillion, which is his MO from business. It's his MO from the government. A couple of things that really were extremely frustrating. The kind of right and wrong that we all learn in kindergarten, the Republican Party is jettisoned. For example, if you're the president, you can't blackmail another country. You can't withhold military aid to Ukraine because they're worried about Russia invading, so that the president will do a political dirty deed. It's like AC/DC, dirty deeds done dirt cheap. That's what mob bosses do. That's not what the American president does. And almost the entire GOP congressional caucus voted in favor of being allowed to blackmail other presidents so that they'll do your own political bidding. I'm talking about the first Trump impeachment. Then the second time around, on January 7th, they were all up in arms, all the top leaders, Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy. They were all just incensed, super angry at Trump. He needs to go. But a week later, they weren't so mad. A couple weeks later, they weren't so mad. Almost none of them voted to get rid of a president who was trying to overthrow the government. To be clear, on January 20th, 2021, all 50 of our state capitals had armed police guarding the state capitol on that the inauguration day. And they weren't guarding us against Al-Qaeda. They were guarding us against Republicans. And so that's something that you just have to wrap your brain around, the amount of letting go of morality to keep themselves in power that happened after that attempt to overthrow our government. What Trump was trying to do is overthrow the government, install a government that was not properly elected. And that should terrify all of us. And instead, it has emboldened Republicans to embrace that lie even more. That is horrendous and inexcusable. The party of life, I want to address this, and I'll say I'm not a pro-abortion guy at all, but the tactics that they're taking are extreme. Here in Texas, Greg Abbott has come up with this law where you have to basically report on your neighbors. It's like Stalin's Soviet Union. It's just disgusting how he's handled this. There's never been even the smallest common sense legislation that everybody would agree on or actions to prevent gun violence. And we had 45,000 people get killed by guns last year. The NRA and the GOP have completely prevented anything like that from happening. And so my kids grew up, they know run, hide, fight. They know they were there while their classmate killed themselves. They were there with the horrendous shooting here in Santa Fe. Hundreds of thousands of American kids have been in school during a school shooting, hundreds of thousands. The trauma that we've given our kids is disgusting. And the tens and tens and tens of thousands of gun deaths, at least some of them could be prevented with some rational thought. But the Republican Party of life has prevented that. When it comes to vaccines, we just lost 1 million Americans to COVID. Those are real deaths. Not all in the Republican Party, but many in the Republican Party were anti-vax. They were anti-mask. They just wanted to ignore COVID. And this ridiculous rhetoric has killed people. Like I have friends who are dead because they didn't get vaccinated. Hundreds of thousands of Americans are like that. Not all the Republican Party, but many in the Republican Party were on that side. They have sided with Russia time and time and time again. Putin clearly interfered in our election in 2016 and again in 2020. The president stood in Helsinki and said, "I believe Putin. Why would he lie to me? I don't believe our intelligence." We tried to blackmail Ukraine. Today, I think a third of the Republicans did not vote to support Ukraine. Some Republicans are trying to hold up aid to Ukraine. This pro-Russia, I love the Russian people, the culture. I love my time flying on the Soyuz spaceship, but what Putin is doing is horrendous. It's immoral and it needs to be stopped. And why Republicans believe in that, I don't know. Going back to kindergarten, the basic premise of fairness, Republicans have lost. Guys like Lindsey Graham, or I don't know how they live with themselves, but Obama had, I think, 9 or 10 months to do a Supreme Court nomination, and Mitch McConnell held it up. And they said that we're not going to do that again. If that happens to us, if the tide's turned, we're not going to do the same. We'll treat it the same. And then with only a couple months left, much less time left in Trump's term, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and they rammed through Amy Coney Barrett with breakneck speed. It's the most basic violation of the fairness the basic tenets of fairness that you know. And of course, that vote is going to be key. It's going to overturn Roe v. Wade. And so basically cheating, one of the things you learned about at the Air Force Academy is you're not supposed to cheat, is how they're getting these policies done. It's not cool. And so I do have some spears to throw at both parties. But trying to overthrow our government is unforgivable, completely unforgivable. And anybody who is on the side of the election was stolen, anybody who voted to not certify the election is unforgivable. They should be out of government. One of the things I learned at business school, we studied China. We had a China week where we just learned all kinds of things. And we read it in English, but it was the original writings that they're talking about. And many Chinese authorities, military people, political people, they write constantly about how the West is in decline, China's rising. It's their rightful place to be the leader of the world. China's no joke. They are powerful. They're very capable. They have all kinds of resources and population, and they are intent on becoming the dominant place on earth. They don't have the freedom of press, of religion, of speech. Their leaders are not accountable to the people at all. There's no democracy there. It's Orwellian. It's 1984. A good friend of mine, Cheng Lei, is a Chinese journalist. She was arrested for no reason, put on trial. We still don't know how many years she's going to have to spend there. It's just egregious abuse of human rights. That is the future of the world if they get what they want. And a world that doesn't have a strong America that can lead Europe and Asia and the other freedom-loving countries in the world is a world where that Chinese Orwellian nightmare is going to take over. It's just that important. Like we have to get our act together in the America in the West, or the future is going to be bleak. You can read it in Orwell novels and Aldous Huxley novels and Fahrenheit 451 novels. There's a stark contrast right now. We're seeing the fruits of that in Ukraine. When you let one man stay in power, take away freedom of speech and of the press, have no democratic accountability, you end up with Ukraine. And what China can do is way worse than what Russia can do. We need to know that. And so with that, all that is context. We have a system that's set up precisely to destroy itself. Our political system, God bless the founders, they put together a miracle. America has been a miracle, a beacon of light for the rest of the world. But man, we are in a precarious spot right now. Social media is amazingly powerful. The algorithms that Twitter has, that Facebook has, that LinkedIn has, that TikTok, they all have algorithms, and our human brain is no match for those algorithms. They know that hate is what wins. I think you're 5 times more likely to click on something that makes you mad than on something that you love. And the algorithms are smart, and that just creates this echo chamber. Whatever it is that makes you mad, whatever it is that you like or don't like, you're going to gravitate towards feeding yourself stuff that makes you mad. Cable news. If you're right leaning, you're going to watch Fox. If you're left leaning, you'll watch MSNBC or CNN. In the old days, everybody watched Walter Cronkite, and there were liberals and conservatives, but everybody had the same baseline of truth. Nowadays, everybody's in an echo chamber unless you actively listen to the BBC and CNN and Fox and Reuters and the different news sources. You're going to be in your echo chamber. Be aware of that. Turn your social media off. Follow people that you don't like or you disagree with. If you do that, then you'll start seeing different points of view. But that requires wisdom and discernment. The other problem that we have, and Catherine Garrell talked about this, is primaries. The primary system, only the most devoted Republicans vote, only the most devoted Democrats vote. So the primary system is designed to promote the most extreme candidates to go to a general election. There's some top 5 voting, ranked choice voting. There's mechanical ways that we can solve that to promote candidates that have to appeal to the broader election. I always say there's a bell curve. I was a math major, so there's this bell curve where most people are in the middle and the fringes are very small. Our political system puts the fringe candidates out, win all the time, especially in Congress. And we need to fix that because we're tearing ourselves apart. People are also losing faith in our system for some basic, again, fairness. The founding fathers had 2 senators per state for a reason. They didn't want the big states of Massachusetts and New York ganging up on South Carolina and Rhode Island, the smaller states. But the difference between the states and when they were 13 colonies, the population, and the difference today is extremely different. The difference between California and Wyoming or North Dakota or Idaho is way more than it was back in the day. And that means that our Senate today is 50-50. The 50 Democratic senators represent 40% less people than the 50 Republican senators do, which means the Republicans have a way outsized power in the most important legislative branch because the country grew and the population differences just got extreme. So people lose faith in democracy when that happens. The electoral college system in the year 2022, it extremely benefits Republicans in an extreme way. Democrats, I saw a figure, they have to win 54% in order to win a general election or something like that. One case in point, since 1988, when George H.W. Bush was first elected, since then, so we've had the 90s, we've had the 2000s, we've had the 2010s, we're in our 4th decade since then. Republicans have won 1 presidential election in the general election by the number of votes. And that was by 0.7%. George W. Bush won by points. He got 50.7% of the vote right after the Iraq war started. So there was this, wartime patriotism. Other than that, the Republicans haven't won a general election, but they're always competitive and they've won several other elections. And so those problems, people lose faith in the American election. And instead of working to better the party and, hey, let's have a 1984 Reagan landslide, they've just gotten more extreme, more culture war focused on things that aren't going to help us, things that aren't going to help us compete against China, things that aren't going to help strengthen, the West and China and Korea and Australia, all these freedom loving countries. So that's a problem. And I'm very concerned about what's happening in my country, what's happening in other countries around the world. And this sounds like a platitude. It's kind of melodramatic, but the fate of the world literally depends on how American democracy goes. I think the Ukraine war has helped us out. It's kind of maybe slapped us in the face a little bit. I hope that we can continue momentum and build in the right direction, but we're not moving in the right direction. And I don't think our political system can be fixed with a 2-party system. The Democrats and Republicans are just too entrenched. They have too much at stake. I don't think a 2-party system is the future of America. It's not going to be a good future if we keep it. I also don't think it's possible to start a viable, large, moderate party because the Republicans and Democrats have such a grip on power. So it's a catch-22, but it's something that I think we need to push to. So as we march towards these midterms, let's try and promote candidates who are going to shun the current dysfunctional system. We're going to have the courage to do what's right, to stand up to their demagogic cult of personality party leader, which is something that belongs in North Korea and not in America. Politicians who are going to be thoughtful and deliberate and not ideological and not appeal to our basest instincts, not appeal to our bad angels, but politicians that'll appeal to our better angels. And if we can't find those good men and women who will lead us in that direction, we're going to continue splitting apart, I'm afraid, until that fracture is beyond repair. That's a future that I'm not willing to accept, and I hope that you are not willing to accept either. So thanks for bearing with me on a monologue. We're going to talk about space and all kinds of fun things in the future: energy, filmmaking, food. My talk about food with Tom Statesman was awesome. It was so much fun. But politics matters too. So I'm going to sprinkle in some of these because they're just that important. If you like the podcast, please give us a rating and subscribe. And I will see you again next week. Thanks for watching Down to Earth with Terry Virts.